Number 10. Narco Drug Submarine. A strange submarine was discovered in Ecuador, but you'll never guess what it was used for. The discovery was made by anti-drug police, who claimed the submarine cost at least $4 million to build and was used to haul upwards of 10 metric tons, 22,000 pounds of cocaine per shipment. Holy cow! The submarine was used by narcotics traffickers to get pure cocaine from South America to the United States. Perhaps the most amazing part is how functional the submarine was when the police found it. It was just as advanced as any modern sub, outfitted for long journeys to and from Ecuador. There was even a dry dock built for it at a secret jungle complex where 50 people were employed to take care of the submarine. It was also their job to ensure the swift and uninterrupted movement of drugs. In a statement made by the DEA, they said this was the first submarine ever seized by authorities that was constructed for transoceanic drug trafficking. It looks like the narco overlords are ditching their sailboats and opting for submarines in a bid to keep drugs flowing into the U.S. And it makes sense for them to do this. They make so much money they might as well come up with a better way to smuggle that product that's making them rich. Number 9. Iceberg Puma. Passengers on a cruise ship sailing through Patagonia in the South American country of Argentina made a shocking discovery. While checking out the scenery, which was mostly huge blocks of ice, they found that one of the icebergs contained a puma. Yes, there was a literal puma just kinda lounging on the iceberg, which itself was floating quite far from shore. This was an enormous cat, a true mountain lion and one of the deadliest predators in Patagonia. Imagine being on the boat and seeing such a majestic animal in such a beautiful place. But just what on earth was it doing stranded on an iceberg? In response to the video footage uploaded by the cruise ship passengers, wildlife experts were quick to inform the public that the puma was not in any true danger. These cats are notoriously skilled swimmers. It probably swam from the mainland to the island in hopes of catching some fish. The worried passengers of the cruise ship didn't witness a stranded puma, but rather a very big cat doing a bit of ice fishing. Number 8. Man in a tree trunk. Authorities in California discovered something extremely unusual in Laguna Hills Park. There's no easy way to say this. They found a man stuck inside of a tree trunk. Yep, it's completely bizarre. Firefighters had to be called to the scene after a fully grown man was found wedged firmly in a tree trunk. He was in there so well that there was no way for him to escape. He wasn't found until police finally responded to reports of someone screaming deep within the park. He was screaming so loud that his calls could be heard nearly a mile away. By the time firefighters finally tracked this guy down, he'd been screaming for so long that his throat was sore. It took the firefighters 1.5 hours to then pry the tree trunk open enough so that he could get out of it. He had gotten part of his body literally stuck underground, with only his head and his arms visible. Unfortunately, he never did reveal why he tried to climb inside the tree trunk in the first place, probably because he was too embarrassed. Thank goodness he was loud enough for people to find him. Otherwise, he'd still be there today. Number 7. Shark-toothed dinosaur. It must be pretty cool to be an archaeologist and discover a dinosaur tooth. A giant dinosaur with teeth like a deadly shark has been discovered in the country of Uzbekistan. According to Live Science, this monstrous creature was about 30 feet, 9 meters long, and lived 90 million years before today. It was also a gigantic predator that would have struck terror into the heart of every other animal in the region. It was a true beast, weighing over 2,200 pounds, 998 kilograms. But the real reason it's so scary is that it had a mouth filled with serrated teeth, which it used to tear and rip the flesh off other dinosaurs. It's not that unusual for paleontologists to find a new predator, but this one really shocked them, primarily because it was over twice as long and over 5 times as heavy as the previously known apex predator in the area. Before the fossil of this creature was discovered, the biggest dino in what is today Uzbekistan in Central Asia was a tyrannosaur. Not a Tyrannosaurus rex, more like a smaller, less intimidating cousin. This newer, far more ferocious dinosaur has been named Ulugbegosaurus uzbekistanis, after an old sultan from the 15th century named Ulugh Beg. That is quite the mouthful. Do you ever wonder how scientists come up with the scientific names for things? If you found a new species of dinosaur, what would you call it? Let us know in the comments section down below, and if you're liking this video, be sure to hit the thumbs up and subscribe buttons if you haven't already. Number 6. Abandoned war machine. Debbie Hartley was on a casual walk with her dog Bonnie when she made an extremely unexpected discovery. It was a walk she had taken many times before, a simple stroll along her local beach in England. But this time, she came across a rather weird piece of metal jutting out from the sand. She checked it out a bit closer and realized that she was standing on top of a crashed warplane. Debbie was quick to upload pictures online and ask for professional help in identifying the mysterious war machine. As it turns out, Debbie and her dog had uncovered the wreckage of a very rare Royal Air Force fighter plane that crashed down on the beach 76 years prior and then was abandoned. It was the Royal Air Force themselves in Britain that confirmed the wreckage as being something called a Bristol Beaufighter, which was active during World War II. It flew on nightly bombing campaigns to try and destroy enemy ships lurking in the North Sea. It was in the year 1944 when this specific plane encountered engine problems and was forced to make an emergency landing on the beach, where it has remained ever since. The reason nobody found it before is that the tide had covered it with sand, masking it for nearly a century. Number 5. Tank Landing Ship. The Solomon Islands are littered with the wreckage of war machines from World War II, but after 70 years of neglect, a lot of them have become unrecognizable or have deteriorated altogether to rusty ash. One of the more surprising war machines was recently spotted by a tourist who found the wreckage of an American tank landing ship, also known as an LST. It was discovered beached with one end rearing up into the jungle trees and the other end clearly below water. How it's managed to not sink for all these years is the biggest mystery. Historical records tell us the LST was built in Virginia and then launched in December of 1942. It was designed to carry tanks and then help offload them at beaches. Unfortunately for this ship, it never even got the chance to do what it was supposed to do. Only 7 short months after being built, it was hit by a torpedo from a Japanese submarine off the small island of New Georgia and literally blown in half. The stern sank immediately, but somehow the other half of the ship ended up beached and is still there today. Number 4. Modern mummies in Papua New Guinea. In Papua New Guinea, a terrifying funeral custom was recently discovered by the outside world. According to National Geographic, the Anga tribe is still mummifying their dead, even today in 2021. It's part of an ancient ceremony in which the Anga convert their dead relatives into mummies and then perch their bodies atop rock ledges near their village. The whole point to this bizarre mummification process is so that the deceased can literally watch over their families. The discovery of this crazy ritual was found by the German photographer Ulla Lohmann, one of the only outsiders to ever be granted access to this secluded community. She says the tribe consists of about 45,000 people, and she was even given some disturbing insight into how they mummify their dead. It's quite different from how the Egyptians used to do it. The Anga have simplified the process by simply smoking the corpses of their dead loved ones for 3 months over a roaring fire. Once the dead body bloats, they poke it with sharp sticks until all the fluid is drained. Then they create a hole with yet another sharp stick for all the organs to splash out of. After the 3 months, the mummy is put on its pedestal above the village like the most ghoulish scarecrow you've ever seen. What do you think of this funerary custom? Number 3. Mysterious Stone Axe. In Denmark, researchers excavating the small island of Lolland made a hugely unexpected discovery. They came across a very rare axe made from flint that had been stuck in the ground for over 5,500 years. The researchers found the axe with its handle still attached, sticking up from the dirt. Amazingly, the head of the axe was about a foot deep, looking surprisingly new for such an ancient relic. To make things even more mysterious, the researchers also found 2 bows, a wooden paddle, and 14 other axe handles stuck upright in the ground. The researchers believe they were all put in the ground deliberately, probably as some kind of mysterious ancient ritual. But they don't know what the ritual may have detailed, or even who was responsible for performing it. These were ancient people from the Stone Age, and archaeologists are still struggling to get a grasp on their forgotten belief system. The reason the axe was such a surprising discovery is that the researchers hadn't expected to find any artifacts linked to mysterious rituals. Up until this point, the most interesting thing they found during their excavations was a set of human footprints, also from the Stone Age. Number 2. Inner Earth. A shocking new discovery has proven that miles below the surface of our planet, there's a diverse ecosystem filled with exotic life forms. But life down here isn't what you might think of when you hear the word ecosystem. There are no weird underground animals or freaky insects. Instead, it's mostly bacteria and single-celled organisms known as archaea. The only critters that live miles below the surface of the planet that look anything close to the life most of us are familiar with are tiny worms called nematodes. And they sort of look like they came from an alien planet. But just where exactly have these weird ecosystems been found? Over the past 20 years, researcher Tullis Onstad from Princeton University has found evidence of deep life beneath the Greenland ice sheet, underneath Antarctica, beneath the ocean floor, and even in places where the temperature goes up to 140 degrees Fahrenheit. This is over a mile below the surface where no sunlight can reach. And yet, despite this, researchers continue to find new and strange life forms, which they say could be evidence that alien critters, albeit small ones, are living on other planets as well. Number 1. The giant hogweed. The giant hogweed is a plant native to Central Asia that made its way to North America in 1917 as a unique plant that people were putting in their gardens. It started in New York City, but today it can actually be found all across North America. Just recently, Virginia became the 12th state known to harbor giant hogweed. It's also in 4 Canadian provinces. Researchers working with the Virginia Polytechnic Institute in June announced the discovery of 30 hogweed plants that they found living in local gardens. You might be thinking, okay, so what? It's just a plant, right? But this plant has a special way of harming unsuspecting gardeners. If the sap of the giant hogweed gets on your skin, then your skin is exposed to the sun, you'll get third-degree burns anywhere the sap is touched. But it only happens if you go in direct sunlight because the sap is solar activated. It's like a plant that activates vampirism. Sort of. The issue comes with people who find giant hogweed in their garden and don't know it's dangerous. They then get some sap on their arms or legs, they walk out into the sun, and suddenly the sap turns into molten lava. If you get it in your eyes, it can even render you blind for the rest of your life. Unfortunately, there's no good news. Scientists keep discovering more and more giant hogweed throughout America. It's hugely dangerous and should be avoided at all costs. Number 10. Lake Shawnee Amusement Park. The Lake Shawnee Amusement Park operated from 1926 to 1966 in Princeton, West Virginia. It was popular among locals from coal mining families and featured a Ferris wheel, swing ride, dance hall, racetrack, concession stands, overnight cabins, and more. 6 people died at the park throughout its 40 years in business. One girl lost her life in the early 1950s when a delivery truck backed up into the swing ride while she was on it. Then a 9-year-old boy got his arm caught in the drain of a swimming pool and drowned after his mother left him unsupervised. The pool was filled in to prevent any more tragedies, but the site's connection with death goes back much further. During the mid-18th century, there was a massacre on the property resulting from a land dispute between 2 families. In the late 1980s, someone bought the Lake Shawnee Amusement Park and reopened it for a short time. But it was quickly shut down so archaeologists could excavate a suspected Native American burial ground. The team found the remains of 13 people dating back to before European settlers arrived. Today, the property is popular among urban and paranormal explorers who are eager to investigate rumors of the park being haunted. Whether or not this is true, the decaying rides and other fixtures that were never dismantled are plenty creepy and unsettling on their own. Number 9. Odessa Catacombs. Beneath the streets of Odessa, Ukraine, there's a haunting network of tunnels known as the Odessa Catacombs. They run for 1,600 miles and extend 200 feet below sea level. There are over 1,000 known entrances to the catacombs. The system's history dates back to the late 18th century when underground stone mines were built as a way to access coquina, a sedimentary rock that was used as a building material for the growing city. The catacombs span 3 levels and consist of unconnected caves, tunnels, and abandoned quarries. Odessa experienced a huge commerce boom from 1819 to 1859, during which time mining expansion was unregulated. It was more or less a free-for-all, with prospectors digging into the ground at whim. Mining became so problematic that it was banned within central Odessa after the Russian Revolution of 1917. During World War II, the tunnels were used for hiding Soviet partisans. Different sections of the complex reveal different chapters in history. The so-called wild area features inscriptions, symbols, paintings, and graffiti of unknown origin and meaning. Decaying human remains have also been found within the network. The catacombs continue to expand near Odessa in areas where mining is allowed, making room for even more mystery. Number 8. Takakonuma Greenland Amusement Park. Let's visit another abandoned park. Takakonuma Greenland is an abandoned theme park in Fukushima Prefecture, Japan. Tucked into a mountainous rural area outside the city of Hobara, the park is reportedly impossible to find on any map. It opened in 1973, only to close down 2 years later, supposedly due to low ticket sales, and so the park could be renovated to attract more visitors. Locals, on the other hand, reportedly claimed that the Takakonuma Greenland closed because multiple people died on the rides. The park reopened in 1986 but struggled to remain in business as it competed with newer and bigger amusement parks like Tokyo Disneyland. Takakonuma Greenland closed for good in 1999, and its rides and buildings were simply left in place. Urban explorers have captured images of heavily decayed rides, including a rusted Ferris wheel and roller coaster. The abandoned park's entrance is covered in graffiti, and overgrowth invades the site's remaining fixtures. Some people claim that the park's creepy and unknown aspects are exaggerated, and that a lot of truths become lost in translation due to cultural and language misunderstandings. And many allege that the park's history is well documented if you know where to look. But it doesn't make this seemingly post-apocalyptic site any less creepy. Number 7. Plymouth. In 1995, the Soufriere Hills volcano began erupting for the first time since the 17th century on the small Caribbean island of Montserrat. Several more eruptions followed, spewing ash 40,000 feet, 12,192 meters into the sky. Two-thirds of the island was destroyed, including the capital city of Plymouth and around 20 other settlements. 19 people died and thousands were evacuated. The eruptions continued on and off for several years, burying Plymouth in ash. It's been turned into a ghost town, and the only visible remnants of the city are the rooftops that poke up from the barren landscape. Writing for Adventure.com, travel journalist Andrew Eames described Plymouth as completely monochrome against the rest of Montserrat's rioting greenery. Over 7,000 of the 12,000 people who lived there when the eruptions began have moved away. Today, roughly half of Montserrat is a designated exclusion zone. The volcano has been relatively quiet since 2010, but remains active. And although Plymouth is uninhabitable, it's still somehow considered the island's capital. The exclusion zone is tightly regulated. Visits are usually not allowed for safety reasons. Anyone with permission to go there must be escorted by police and an authorized tour guide. Number 6. Dupont Circle Tunnels. The Dupont Underground is an abandoned trolley line located beneath the busy streets of Dupont Circle in Washington, D.C. It was built in 1949 but wasn't in service for long. In 1962, the system was shut down in favor of buses while the area's subway system was developed. The 75,000 square foot, 6,968 square meters Dupont Circle station was prepared as a fallout shelter in case Cold War tensions erupted into nuclear war between the United States and the Soviet Union. In 1975, the tunnels were permanently sealed off and abandoned. A developer bought the eerie property from the city in 1995 and built a food court along the tracks called Dupont Down Under. It was shut down just months later for numerous reasons. The ventilation and lighting were poor, employees were miserable working in the dark and dank conditions, and the idea of eating in a dingy, dreary basement-like food court did not appeal to many customers. And understandably so. In late 2016, the Dupont Circle station and its tunnels were reopened to the public. It's currently open for tours and is being transformed into an art space. Number 5. Memorial Mound Mausoleum. Clyde Booth was a gravedigger with a big vision. He wanted to give the public a unique alternative to traditional burials. Booth turned this dream into a reality in 1992 when he opened Memorial Mound, an underground mausoleum built into a hill in Bessemer, Alabama. The visitors area consisted of a chapel, a computer that visitors could use to view pictures and videos of their lost loved ones, and a marble wall where people left items in memory of deceased. There was also a casket sales room. Behind the marble wall was a warehouse-like room filled with metal racks for holding caskets. This area was off limits to the public. Coffins were stacked up to 10 feet, 3 meters high, and the lower slots came with a heftier price tag. But Booth's unique idea didn't take off as hotly as he thought it would, and not many of these spaces were ever filled. Facing imminent financial ruin, he closed Memorial Mound in 1996 after selling less than a dozen burials in 4 years. Relatives were allowed to continue visiting the mausoleum until 2000, when the building was permanently shuttered. Vandals looted the site for scrap metal and left it in disarray. Meanwhile, urban explorers broke in out of sheer curiosity. In 2014, photos of the dilapidated property surfaced, showing broken glass, embalming supplies, display caskets, and decaying and skeletal human remains, including at least one body left in an open casket. Authorities had known about the building's neglected state for quite some time, but the sickening images finally caused them to act. They removed the remains of 7 individuals and took the bodies to the local coroner's office so their families could make some long overdue final arrangements. By then, some of the graves had been ransacked, and someone even took a human skull as a morbid memento of their trespassing adventure into the mausoleum. Number 4. Sarajevo Olympic Village. The 1984 Winter Olympics took place in the city of Sarajevo in Bosnia and Herzegovina. It was the first Olympic Games to be held in a socialist or Slavic-speaking country. Less than a decade later, the country was ravaged by civil war. Many of the former Olympic venues were destroyed, while others were simply abandoned. Even worse, some of these structures were repurposed for war-related uses. For example, the Olympic Hotel was turned into a prison, and the bobsled track was used as an artillery stronghold. After the fighting stopped, nature reclaimed the site, including the bobsled track, a disused ski jumping venue, and stands that spectators once sat in. The fixtures are covered in graffiti, serving as the only reminder of a lingering human presence. Stray dogs have taken over Kosovo Stadium, where the welcoming ceremony took place. Abandoned Olympic venues are a common problem among former host countries and cities, who often have little to no use for the multi-billion-dollar facilities once the games are over. If a government can afford it, they'll often demolish the structures. But those who lack the money to do so also typically can't afford to maintain the buildings and instead choose to conveniently let them rot. Number 3. Patari Prison. On Estonia's northern coast near the old town of Tallinn, there's an abandoned jail known as Patari Prison. It was originally built as a sea fortress around 1840 and functioned as a prison starting after World War I. From 1944 to 1991, the Soviets used the site as a high-security lockup. During that time, it was considered one of Estonia's most terrifying prisons. Hundreds of prisoners, including hardened criminals and political captives, were housed there at any given time. Inmates at Patari were subjected to brutal KGB interrogations, and many were ultimately executed. The prison was abandoned in 2004 when Estonia joined the European Union. Since then, very little has been done to maintain or restore the site. It's open to the public as a museum, allowing visitors to experience Patari in the exact state it was left in, minus the toll taken by time and the elements. Some of the cells even have prisoners' personal belongings in them, including books and magazines. Estonian-Canadian sisters Lisa and Kristen Dobbin visited Patari Prison during a quest to learn more about their ancestral heritage. They likened the facility to a Stanley Kubrick film, describing it in a blog for Estonian World as a dark psychological thriller about loneliness and lives misspent. The sisters also reported feeling overwhelmed with dread and anxiety during their tour. One of Patari Prison's most disturbing features is its operating room, which still carries a distinctive unpleasant odor. It contains an old bedspan, glass bottles that once held medical fluids, and obsolete equipment, leaving one to wonder if any strange experiments went on there. Number 2. St. Albans Sanatorium. The St. Albans Sanatorium in Redford, Virginia originally functioned as a Lutheran boys' school. It's considered one of the most haunted places in the United States. Rumor has it that staff encouraged bullying, making the learning environment unbearable and pushing some students to commit suicide. The building was repurposed as a psychiatric infirmary in 1916. Advertisements depicted the St. Albans Sanatorium as a preferable alternative to other asylums, boasting of a rooftop garden, bowling alley, and a small farm. But this was far from reality for the patients at St. Albans, who were brutally forced to undergo experimental treatment without their consent, often leaving them permanently disabled or worse. The procedures included lobotomies, where part of the brain is removed, insulin-induced comas, electroconvulsive therapy, and so-called hydrotherapy sessions, which involved draping cold, wet towels over a patient and leaving them like that for days. Employees were incapable of handling the thousands of patients who were there at any given time, and conditions went from bad to worse, driving many to suicide. St. Albans finally closed during the 1990s, but some paranormal enthusiasts don't think that everyone has left the building. Many have reported seeing and hearing apparitions, shadowy figures, levitating objects, voices, and other eerie sights and sounds. It's said that the building itself carries a dark and depressing feeling, and that this alone is enough to give someone the chills. Number 1. Port Arthur. Port Arthur opened in 1830 as a timber station on the Australian island of Tasmania. Starting in 1853, the most hardened British criminals in Australia were sent there. Those who re-offended after their first conviction or who were too difficult to handle at a traditional jail ended up at Port Arthur, where boys as young as 9 years old were sent. The prison had some of the highest security measures throughout the British penal system and was deemed inescapable. Instead of physically punishing prisoners like other penal stations, the staff at Port Arthur psychologically tortured the inmates. In what's known as a separate prison system, prisoners were kept as isolated from one another as possible. They were forced to wear hoods and remain silent, effectively cutting them off from meaningful human contact. This hardlined policy was allegedly designed to give inmates a chance to reflect on the behavior that landed them at Port Arthur in the first place. But the sensory deprivation and solitude took a heavy psychological toll, and many prisoners became severely mentally ill. The experimental separate prison system ultimately proved that cruel treatment is not always defined by physical suffering. Consequently, the daily occurrences at Port Arthur were brought to light during a penal reform movement. In 1877, the prison was abandoned, and several decaying buildings on the site were auctioned off. People didn't seem to mind seeing the site's history being erased. Eager to rebrand the area, they established a new town. But curious visitors still found their way to the ruins. During the 1970s, what's left of Port Arthur fell under government management, and in 2010 it became a UNESCO World Heritage Site, ensuring that the inhumane suffering that went on at the prison will never be forgotten. Number 9. Kapustin Yar. Kapustin Yar is more or less the Russian version of Roswell. The Soviet Union established the top-secret base and missile test range in 1946 for the development of its space program. The nearby town of Znamensk was established as a place for housing scientists, staff members, and their families. At first, the town's existence was kept secret. It didn't exist on maps, and visitors needed special permission to enter. In its early days, Kapustin Yar used materials and scientific information seized from Germany at the end of World War II. The first rocket that was launched at the site in 1947 was one of 11 German ballistic missiles, or A-4s, that had been captured. Western intelligence first learned about the site in the early 1950s through spy flights and by questioning German scientists who had worked there. The British government denies ever conducting spy flights or receiving information from participants at Kapustin Yar. 5 atmospheric nuclear tests were carried out at Kapustin Yar between 1957 and 1961. From 1966 onward, the base functioned as a site for launching spacecrafts known as a cosmodrome. Many people claim to have seen UFOs near Kapustin Yar. In 1986, eyewitnesses described seeing a spaceship crash into a nearby mountain. A New York Times article wrote about people seeing a large red sphere and a three-eyed alien wearing silver overalls. A series of so-called leaked reports from alleged former employees claim that there are underground chambers at Kapustin Yar where UFOs are stored and alien autopsies are performed. The U.S. attempted to spy on the base, but its secretive activities went on underground, leaving officials capable of only speculating at best. Number 8. Porton Down. Located in the scenic highlands of Wiltshire, England, Porton Down is a so-called science park that consists of 2 government sites. One belongs to the Ministry of Defence's Defense Science and Technology Laboratory, DSTL, and the other belongs to Public Health England. The sprawling 7,000-acre, 2,800 hectares property was developed during World War I as the War Department Experimental Station. Today, it's one of the UK's most controversial and mysterious military research facilities. Porton Down has a concerning reputation for experimenting with the world's most dangerous pathogens and for its biological and chemical weapons research. Scientists tested poison gases, nerve agents, and other potentially fatal substances. These projects were reportedly carried out as a response to German chemical warfare. Reportedly, in the past, human subjects were used in the experiments at Porton Down. More recently, the facility has come under fire for testing on animals, including mice, guinea pigs, non-human primates, rats, pigs, ferrets, and sheep. Porton Down claims to operate under a code of reducing the number of animals used, refining their procedures, and replacing animal tests with non-animal experiments. But everything that's ever happened here is top secret, so it's hard to truly measure the amount of damage done to human and animal lives. Number 7. Pine Gap. In the middle of Australia, there's a jointly operated U.S. satellite surveillance base and Australian Earth station known as Pine Gap. Located roughly 11 miles, 18 kilometers southwest of Alice Springs, it's partially run by high-ranking personnel from the Central Intelligence Agency, CIA, the National Security Agency, NSA, and the National Reconnaissance Office, NRO. There are over 800 employees operating the site, which consists of a massive computer complex that's used for controlling U.S. spy satellites as they pass over the Middle East, China, and Russia's Asian regions, an area spanning roughly 1/3 of the Earth. The remote location was chosen for its strategic significance, mainly the fact that it's too far away for spy ships to intercept its signal. Pine Gap is considered essential to both national and global security. Its intelligence-gathering satellites are used for identifying the location of airstrikes, nuclear weapons, and other military and intelligence sites that U.S. officials think it's in the country's best interest to know about. The name Pine Gap may sound familiar to you. That's because there's a Netflix series with the same name, and it's based on insider information from a 23-year NSA veteran who knows what life is like at the base. Number 6. North Korea's bunkers and bases. Nicknamed the Hermit Kingdom, North Korea is one of the world's most secretive countries. It comes as no surprise, then, that it boasts a number of clandestine military bases. North Korea's history of building underground facilities in order to gain the upper hand against its enemies goes at least as far back as the 70s, when several tunnels were discovered beneath the Demilitarized Zone, DMZ, that separates North and South Korea. Today, the North Korean military is thought to have 3 underground air bases. One of them, located in the city of Wonsan, is equipped with a 5,900-foot-long, 1,798 meters, 90-foot wide, 27 meters runway that runs through a mountain. Near the DMZ, there's a collection of troop bunkers that are capable of hiding anywhere between 1,500 and 2,000 soldiers. They were built starting in 2004 and may consist of as many as 800 bunkers, as well as a series of decoys and hundreds of caves for hiding artillery. There may also be underground facilities for housing North Korea's leadership in the event of a war or catastrophe, according to Kyle Mizokami, writing for the National Interest. In fact, the U.S. US believes that there are anywhere between 6,000 and 8,000 of these shelters throughout the country. If a war broke out, North Korea's adversary would be tasked with tracking down all of these facilities, which the US is already trying to do. Since they're hard to see using satellite imagery, the best information comes from defectors. For now, the true extent of the Hermit Kingdom's hidden bases and bunkers is unknown. Number 5. Ulin Naval Base. In recent years, the Chinese military has built numerous artificial islands and secretive facilities in a region of the South China Sea that 5 countries claim ownership of. Nobody knows exactly what they're using the sites for, but anyone who flies too close is promptly told to go away. In addition to building these mysterious bases, China is also carrying out some seriously shady activity in its own territory at Ulin Naval Base. Last year, satellite photos captured footage of a nuclear-powered attack submarine entering a mysterious cave on Hainan Island, where the base is situated deep underground. The vessel was identified as a Type 093 Shang-class attack submarine. 6 of them are known to exist, and they're designed to hunt and take down warships and other submarines, according to Radio Free Asia's RFR Drake Long. At the time the photo was captured, the other submarines that are known to dock at the station were nowhere in sight. An RFA report discussed how the image points toward China's ability to levy considerable power over the contested region of the South China Sea. Because China owns Hainan Island, no other countries can contest any of the suspicious activity they see going on there. Nevertheless, the US has been keeping an eye on the site for several decades, and officials have noticed that the base is heavily fortified. The Chinese military began building the base in 2000, and it's reportedly still under construction. What will come from the site remains to be seen. Number 4. Cheyenne Mountain Complex. The Cheyenne Mountain Operations Center, CMOC, is part of the Cheyenne Mountain Air Force Station, CMAFS. The complex was built during the late 1950s at the height of the Cold War. It was inspired by the idea of a hardened command and control center, according to the North American Aerospace Defense Command, NORAD website. This highly secure complex was built beneath 2,000 feet, 610 meters of granite on a 5-acre, 2-hectare site. It consists of 15 3-story buildings that are protected from earthquake or explosion-related movement by a giant system of springs. Thanks to this sophisticated system, none of the buildings should move more than an inch, 2.5 centimeters, in the event of a man-made or natural disaster. The structures also comprise the only high-altitude Department of Defense facility equipped to withstand a burst of radiation known as an electromagnetic pulse. With several sets of heavy-duty blast doors, the CMOC is protected from a 30-megaton nuclear explosion from as close as 1.2 miles, 2 kilometers away. It also has its own water supply and heating and cooling system. In its early years, the site functioned as a monitoring center and worldwide early warning system for any unwelcome presence in U.S. and Canadian airspace, including ballistic missiles, space systems, and potential attacks by foreign aircraft. In 2008, NORAD and U.S. Northcom headquarters were relocated to nearby Peterson Air Force Base in Colorado Springs. Today, the CMOC falls under the control of the newly created Space Force. It operates as an alternate command center and is used for crew training. In addition to the equipment necessary for its day-to-day operations, the complex contains a bunker with cots, suites for high-ranking personnel, fitness centers, a medical facility, a store, and a cafeteria. Number 3. Raven Rock Mountain Complex. Located near Blue Ridge Summit, Pennsylvania, Raven Rock Mountain Complex, RRMC, is a highly restricted U.S. military installation complete with a nuclear bunker. It was built starting in the 1950s amid heightened Cold War paranoia about impending war with the Soviet Union. In the event of nuclear war or some other catastrophic national emergency, Raven Rock would enable the American government to continue operating. There are at least 100 staff members on site at any given time, but the facility is capable of housing and protecting thousands of people, and it's been used during past emergencies. After the 9/11 attacks on the World Trade Center towers in New York City, Vice President Dick Cheney was sent to Raven Rock. In fact, the Department of Defense was thinking about closing the facility before the terror attacks proved that it's useful to have. The 650-acre, 263-hectare site is part of a network of bunkers designed for the same purpose, including the Cheyenne Mountain Operations Center, CMOC, and the Mount Weather Emergency Operations Center in Virginia. While the existence of the RRMC is no secret, what goes on there is totally off-limits to outsiders. The government acknowledges some of the units and programs that operate at the site, including the Defense Threat Reduction Agency, the 114th Signal Battalion, and the Defense Information Systems Agency. But that's all officials will disclose, leaving the rest to our imaginations. Number 2. American bases in Africa. For years, the U.S. Pentagon's African Command, AFRICOM, claimed to have only one base in Africa. Known as Camp Lemonnier, it's located in Djibouti. Would you be surprised to learn that Camp Lemonnier is far from the only American military base in Africa? In fact, an AFRICOM map and detailed plans obtained by The Intercept in 2019 identified 29 U.S. military installments in 15 countries across the continent. The discovery came not long after AFRICOM commander Stephen Townsend claimed that the U.S. military maintains a light and relatively low-cost footprint in Africa. After the secret outposts were outed, AFRICOM spokesperson John Manley announced that 2 of the bases were closed, while 15 so-called enduring locations and 12 contingency locations remained. But according to the paperwork, the U.S. is seeking to expand its presence throughout Africa. Interestingly, as the number of American forces increased in recent years, violence and extremism in Africa worsened. For example, the number of militant Islamic groups operating within the continent has skyrocketed by 400% since 2010. As a result, the U.S. military reduced its goal from tearing down these organizations to simply containing them. As revealing as the documents are, AFRICOM officials are maintaining a vague stance about the command's presence and future plans in Africa. And they've more or less admitted that the U.S. military has several cooperative training locations which are not officially considered bases. Moreover, it's probably safe to assume that AFRICOM doesn't reveal the presence of certain highly trained soldiers in Africa. U.S. Special Operations Forces such as Navy SEALs and Army Green Berets often operate in secrecy due to the nature of their missions. Number 1. U.S. South Pole Station. The Amundsen-Scott South Pole Station was built in 1956. Over the course of a decade, a 33-foot, 10 meters thick layer of heavy snow accumulated on the building. For this reason, a replacement was needed to accommodate the growing interest in scientific research at the South Pole. In 1968, planners settled on plans to build a dome directly on the ice sheet. Measuring 164 feet, 50 meters wide at its base, the building would house a library, recreation center, bedrooms, science workspaces, a post office, and more. The dome was completed in 1973 and remained in service until the National Science Foundation dedicated a new building in early 2008. The current station sits 9,306 feet, 2,835 meters above sea level, and it can adjust its elevation to prevent snow from covering it. It's drifting along with the ice sheet at a rate of about 33 feet, 10 meters per year. At any given time, there are between 50 and 200 scientists and support staff living on site. The building contains housing, dining, recreation, science, and communication facilities. Due to the harsh weather, no supplies can be flown in during the winter. The station is designed to be self-sufficient for months at a time and is equipped with massive generators that run on jet fuel. It also has its own waste management facility and maintenance garages. All medical supplies, food, and other materials are delivered before the winter begins. There's also a greenhouse where vegetables are grown to supplement the needed food supply. Thanks for watching. Which one of these secret military base interests you the most? Let us know in the comments below and don't forget to subscribe. And we'll see you next time for another amazing video right here on American Eye.